The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal sanctum of Drakmor Prime. Inside, the massive structure that stretched toward the purple sky, Elder Korath the Wise lay dying. His once brilliant emerald scales had faded to a dull gray color. The great wings that had once carried him across star systems now barely moved with each labored breath. Korath was 1,847 years old. For most species in the galaxy, this would mean nothing. But for the Vorthok, the dragon-like beings who ruled this corner of space, it meant everything. Vorthok were supposed to live for 2,000 years. They were supposed to remain strong and wise until their final day. They were not supposed to waste away like this. The fading had come for Korath 6 months ago. It started small, as it always did. A slight tiredness after flying. Colors seeming less bright. Food tasting bland. Then the real symptoms began. His scales lost their shine. His fire grew weak. His massive body, once the size of a human building, began to shrink. Valara, the swift, paced around her father's resting chamber. At 234 years old, she was young by Vorthok standards. Her scales still gleamed like polished copper, and her wings could carry her faster than most starships. But watching her father slowly die filled her with a rage that made her inner fire burn hotter than ever. "There must be something we can do," Valara said for the 100th time that week. Her voice echoed off the crystal walls with a sound like rolling thunder. Korath opened one massive golden eye. Even that simple movement seemed to drain him. "Daughter, we have tried everything. The Council of Elders has consulted every healer in our territories. The Zephyrians brought their best doctors. Even the machine minds of the synthetic collective found no answers. Then we asked someone new," Valara replied, her claws scraping against the crystal floor. "There are species out there we have never contacted. New minds with new ideas." "And who would you suggest?" Korath asked. Though his tone suggested he already knew he would not like the answer. Valara had been thinking about this for weeks. She had studied the galactic databases, reading about every intelligent species known to exist. Most were either too primitive to help or already allied with the Vorthok. But there was one species that caught her attention. They were young, barely having reached the stars a few hundred years ago. They were small and weak compared to the Vorthok, but the reports about them were strange. "The humans," she said finally. Korath's other eye opened. "The humans? Those tiny mammals from the third spiral arm. Valara, they are children compared to us. What could they possibly know that we do not?" This was the question Valara had been asking herself. The humans had no great technology like the synthetic collective. They were not ancient and wise like the Vorthok. They did not have the psychic powers of the Mindwalkers or the energy manipulation abilities of the Starweavers. By every measure that mattered in galactic society, humans were nothing special. But the reports about them told a different story. Human traders who had solved cargo problems that had puzzled other species for decades. Human engineers who had fixed broken alien technology by thinking about it in completely new ways. Human diplomats who had ended wars by finding solutions that no one else had considered. "Father, do you remember the story of the Kethran trade war?" Valara asked. Korath nodded slowly. "The Kethrans and the Morvok fought for 30 years over shipping routes through the Nebula of Storms. Millions died. The war only ended when both sides ran out of ships to fight with. That was the official story," Valara said. "But I found the real records. The war ended because a human cargo captain named Williams found a way to navigate the nebula that neither side had thought of. He used solar winds and magnetic fields in a pattern that seemed impossible." "Mean the species can help us?" Korath said. But his voice carried less certainty than before. "There are dozens of stories like this, Father. Hundreds, maybe. Humans solve problems by thinking in ways that other species do not. They see patterns that we miss. They try solutions that we would never consider because we think they are too simple or too strange." Korath was quiet for a long time. Outside the crystal walls, other Vorthok flew between the floating cities of Drakmor Prime. They moved with the grace and power that had made their people feared across the galaxy for 10,000 years. But inside this chamber, the greatest of their kind was slowly dying from a curse that all their wisdom could not break. The Council will never prove contact with humans, Korath said finally. General Thaxon considers them barely above animals. Counselor Morith thinks they are a potential threat that should be contained. Even the moderate voices believe that asking humans for help would damage our reputation among the older species. Valara had expected this. The Vorthok Council was made up of dragons who were all over 1,000 years old. They had ruled the galaxy when humans were still living in caves. The idea that these ancient beings might need help from a species that had not even existed when they were young was almost unthinkable. Then, we did not ask the Council, Valara said quietly. Korath stared at his daughter. Valara, what are you thinking? I am thinking that you are dying, and no one else has any answers. I am thinking that sometimes the young must act when the old cannot. I am thinking that our pride means nothing if it costs us our lives. If you contact humans without council approval, they will exile you. Maybe worse. Valara moved closer to her father. She could see how much effort it took for him to keep talking. The fading was getting worse. Soon, even the strongest Vorthok healers would not be able to keep him alive. Father, do you remember when I was young and asked you why we ruled the galaxy? Because we are the strongest, Korath answered automatically. No, father. You told me we rule because we are the wisest, because we make the best decisions for everyone, not just for ourselves. If there is even a small chance that humans can help, then wisdom says we should try. Korath closed his eyes. For a moment, Valara thought he had fallen asleep. Then he spoke, his voice so quiet she had to lean close to hear. Do what you think is right, daughter, but be careful. If this goes wrong, it will not be just your life at risk. It could mean war with species that see human involvement as a threat to the galactic order. Valara touched her father's great head gently with one claw. I understand, father, but doing nothing means watching you die. I cannot accept that. That night, while the council slept and the guards changed shifts, Valara made her way to the communication center. The facility was designed to send messages across the galaxy instantly using quantum entanglement networks. She had never used it without permission before, but her father had taught her how it worked years ago. Valara composed her message carefully. It had to be clear enough for humans to understand, but not so detailed that it would reveal military secrets if intercepted by hostile species. She explained about the fading, about how it was killing the eldest Vorthok, and about how no known science could stop it. She ended the message with a simple request. We need a new way of thinking. We need someone who sees problems differently than we do. If you can help us, we will be in your debt. Valara encrypted the message and aimed it toward Earth. The signal would take several days to reach human space, even at quantum speeds. She had no way of knowing if anyone would receive it, or if they would care about the problems of dragons they had never met. But she watched her father sleep fitfully in the crystal sanctum. Growing weaker with each passing hour, Valara knew she had made the right choice. Sometimes wisdom meant taking risks that others would not take. Sometimes the greatest strength was admitting that you needed help. The message shot through space toward a small blue. A world where a species of problem solvers was about to receive the most important challenge of their short existence. Dr. Kim Dae-ho was drinking his third cup of coffee that morning when the universe changed forever. He sat in his small office at the Seoul Institute of Galactic Studies, staring at data streams from deep space monitoring stations. Most days brought nothing more interesting than solar flare readings or asteroid movement patterns. Today was different. The quantum receiver started beeping at exactly 9:47 a.m., Seoul Standard Time. The sound was urgent, the kind reserved for priority signals from known alien civilizations. But when Dae-ho checked the source identifier, his coffee mug slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Unknown origin. Unknown species. Unknown technology signature. Dae-ho had been studying alien communications for 15 years. He knew the signal patterns of every species that Earth had contacted. The gentle traders, with their musical language that sounded like whale songs. The crystal builders who communicated through light frequencies. The wandering fleet that spoke in mathematical equations. This signal matched none of them. Menesio. "Get in here right now," he called to his research partner in the next office. Park Menesio appeared in the doorway. Her engineering coverall still stained with grease from working on temporal detection equipment. She was 3 years younger than Deho, but twice as good at understanding alien technology. "What is it?" "You look like you saw a ghost." "Better than a ghost." "Look at this." Deho pointed to the signal analysis on his screen. "We just received a message from someone we have never met before." Menesio moved closer to study the data. Her eyes widened as she realized what she was looking at. The quantum signature is massive. Whatever sent this has technology far beyond anything we know. The power requirements alone would need the energy output of a small star. "Can you decode it?" Deho asked. Menesio sat down at the second workstation and began running the signal through translation programs. The universal translator was a human invention that had made them valuable to other species. Most aliens could only communicate with species they had met before. Humans had created a system that could learn new languages from scratch. The process took 4 hours. Deho paced around the office while Menesio worked, occasionally bringing her more coffee and sandwiches. Outside their window, Seoul continued its normal routine. People went to work. Children played in parks. Traffic moved through the streets. None of them knew that humanity had just received its most important message ever. "Got it," Menesio announced finally. "The language is incredibly complex. Whoever sent this thinks in ways that are very different from humans. But I managed to decode the main content." She transferred the translated message to the main screen. Both humans read it in silence, then read it again to make sure they understood. The message was from someone called Valara, the Swift of the Vorthok. She described her people as long-lived rulers of a distant region of the galaxy. She explained that their elders were dying from something called the Fading, a curse that no known science could cure. She asked for human help, specifically mentioning that humans were known for solving problems in unexpected ways. "Dragons," Deho said quietly. "She is describing dragons, Menesio. Real dragons who rule part of the galaxy." Menesio was less impressed by the fantasy aspect. Her engineering mind focused on the practical problems. "This could be a trap, Deho. How do we know these Vorthok are friendly? How do we know this message is even real?" "Look at the quantum signature again," Deho replied. "No known species can fake that level of technology. And why would someone lie about needing help? If they wanted to harm us, they could probably do it without asking nicely first." Menesio had to admit he had a point, but she was still worried about the risks. "Even if this is real, what makes them think we can help? They have technology that makes ours look like stone tools. They have lived for thousands of years while we barely live for 100. Why would ancient space dragons need anything from humans?" This was the question that excited Deho the most. He had studied every recorded case of humans working with alien species. The pattern was always the same. Humans did not win through superior technology or ancient wisdom. They won by thinking differently. "Remember the crystalline hive problem?" he asked Menesio. The crystal builders had been trying to fix their quantum computer network for 200 years. Every expert in the galaxy said it was impossible. Then human engineer Sarah Chen looked at the problem and realized they were trying to fix something that was not broken. The network was working perfectly. They just had the wrong expectations about how it should work. "That was one case," Menesio said. "And it was lucky." "One case? Maybe. But there are dozens of similar stories. Humans solve alien problems not because we are smarter, but because we think in ways that other species do not. We see patterns they miss. We try solutions they consider impossible." Menesio was starting to understand Deho's excitement. But she was also starting to understand the danger. If we get involved in this, it changes everything. We would be dealing with a species powerful enough to rule part of the galaxy. That kind of contact could attract attention from other aliens who might not want humans getting too involved in galactic politics. Or it could make us allies with one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, Deho countered. "Menesio, this is the chance of a lifetime. Maybe the chance of a species time? If we can help these Vorthok, if we can prove that humans have something valuable to offer the galaxy, It could change our entire future. They were interrupted by a knock on the office door. Captain Lee Jae-won of the Earth Defense Force entered without waiting for permission. He was a tall man with serious eyes and the kind of presence that made people listen when he spoke. "Dr. Kim, I need to talk to you about the signal you received this morning," Jae-won said without introduction. Dae-ho and Minesio exchanged glances. "How do you know about the signal?" Dae-ho asked. "Because every government on Earth is asking the same question," Jae-won replied. "Deep space monitoring picked up a massive quantum burst aimed at our planet. The source appears to be from outside known space. Since you are our best expert on alien communications, I was sent to find out what we are dealing with." Dae-ho made a quick decision. If the government was already involved, hiding the message would only make things worse. He showed Jae-won the translated text and explained what they knew about the Vorthok. Jae-won read the message twice, its expression growing more serious with each word. "The dragon's asking humans for help," he said finally. "This is either the best thing that ever happened to our species or the most dangerous. What do you think we should do?" Minesio asked. Jae-won was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing options that none of them could fully understand. "I think we answer them," he said finally. "But we do it carefully, with proper preparation and backup plans. If these Vorthok are real, and if they really need our help, then we have a responsibility to try. But we also have a responsibility to protect Earth if this goes wrong." "You mean actually go there?" Dae-ho asked. "Travel to their home world." "I mean exactly that. I have a ship, the Hanbok, designed for long-range exploration. My crew includes medical specialists and cultural experts. If we are going to help dying aliens, we need to do it properly." Minesio looked from Dae-ho to Jae-won. "And if this is a trap?" Jae-won smiled grimly. "Then we spring it, with our eyes open and our weapons ready. But somehow I do not think it is a trap. The message is too desperate, too honest. Whoever this Valara is, she is risking everything to save someone she cares about. That kind of desperation is hard to fake. So we go," Dae-ho said. "It was not really a question. We go," Jae-won confirmed. "But first, we assemble the right team. Dr. Yoon Hae-jin from the medical center. She knows more about alien biology than anyone on Earth. Choi Boram from the cultural studies department. She understands how to communicate with species that think differently than we do. And the two of you, because we will need both translation skills and engineering expertise." Minesio shook her head in amazement. 3 days ago, our biggest problem was calibrating deep space sensors. Now, we are planning to travel across the galaxy to help dying dragons. "Welcome to First Contact Protocol," Jae-won said. "Nothing is ever simple. Everything changes faster than you expect." As they began planning humanity's first mission to help an unknown alien species, none of them realized that they were about to discover something that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The fading was not just a mysterious disease affecting one species. It was the first sign of an ancient threat that had been waiting in the shadows for millions of years.
The journey to Drakmor Prime took 18 days through hyperspace. The Hanbok was the newest ship in Earth's exploration fleet, but it felt tiny compared to the vast distances they were crossing. Captain Lee Jae-won spent most of the trip reviewing everything humanity knew about dragon mythology. Wondering how much of it might actually be true, Dr. Kim Dae-ho and Park Min-seo worked together to refine their translation programs. They wanted to be able to communicate clearly when they arrived. Dr. Yoon Hae-jin studied what little medical data they had about long-lived species, trying to prepare for whatever they might find. Choi Boram read every cultural report about powerful alien civilizations, looking for clues about how to behave around beings who could probably destroy their ship with a thought. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace near Drakmor Prime, the entire crew stood silent at the observation windows. The planet was unlike anything they had ever seen. Purple oceans reflected the light of 2 orange suns. Floating cities drifted through the atmosphere like jeweled clouds. Massive creatures that could only be dragons soared between crystal spires that reached toward space. "My God," Dr. Yoon Hae-jin whispered. "They really are dragons." "Incoming transmission," the ship's communications officer announced. "Universal translator is working. The signal is coming from someone called Valara the Swift." Captain Jae-won nodded. Put her through. The main screen flickered to life, showing a creature that made everyone on the bridge take a step backward. Velara was beautiful in the way that storms and volcanoes are beautiful, magnificent and dangerous. Her copper scales caught the light like polished metal. Her golden eyes were larger than a human head. When she spoke, her voice carried the sound of distant thunder. "Humans of Earth," Velara said, "I cannot express how grateful I am that you answered my call. I did not know if you would come, or if you would be able to help if you did come. But you are here, and that gives me hope." "We came as soon as we could," Captain Jawan replied. "We understand that your people are facing some kind of medical crisis. We brought our best doctors and scientists. Then please follow my guidance to the Crystal Sanctum. My father grows weaker each day. I fear we do not have much time left." The humans were shocked by their first close look at Vorthak civilization. Everything was built on a scale that made human cities look like toy models. The landing pad where they set down the Hanbok could have held 100 ships their size. The corridors they walked through had ceilings that disappeared into shadows above. The crystal walls showed flowing patterns of light that seemed to respond to the emotions of whoever was looking at them. But it was the Vorthak themselves that truly amazed the human visitors. Each dragon was unique, with scales of different colors and patterns. Some had wings like bats, others like birds, still others like butterfly wings made of metal and jewels. They moved with fluid grace despite their enormous size. When they spoke, their voices ranged from soft whispers to sounds like earthquakes. Not all the dragons were happy to see humans. General Thaxon the Terrible blocked their path to the Crystal Sanctum. He was old even by Vorthak standards, with black scales scarred by 1,000 battles. His red eyes burned with suspicion and anger. "These tiny creatures are supposed to save Elder Korath," Thaxon growled. "Velara, you have brought insects to heal a titan. This is beyond foolish. This is insane." "General Thaxon," Velara replied with steel in her voice, "you have had 2,000 years to find a cure for the fading. Every healer, every scientist, every wise elder in our territory has tried and failed. If insects can succeed where titans have failed, then perhaps we should listen to insects." Dr. Kim Dae-ho stepped forward, trying not to show how terrified he was of the massive dragon looming over him. "General, we know we seem small and weak compared to your people. But sometimes small creatures see things that large ones miss. Sometimes being different is exactly what a problem needs." Thaxon stared at the human for a long moment. "You dare to lecture me, creature? I was ruling star systems when your species was still learning to make fire. And yet," Dr. Yoon Hyejin said quietly, "your experience has not solved this problem. Maybe what you need is inexperience. Maybe you need someone who does not know that something is impossible." Velara used the distraction to lead the humans past Thaxon and into the Crystal Sanctum. When they saw Elder Korath, Dr. Yoon Hyejin immediately understood why Velara was so desperate. The great dragon was clearly dying. His breathing was shallow, his scales were gray and dull, and his massive body seemed to be shrinking before their eyes. "Elder Korath," Velara said gently, "the humans have come to help." Korath opened one golden eye and studied the tiny visitors. "So small," he whispered, "like bright sparks in the darkness. Tell me, little humans, what do you see when you look at a dying dragon?" Dr. Yoon Hyejin approached carefully, pulling out her medical scanner. "With your permission, Elder, I would like to run some tests. We want to understand exactly what is happening to you." "Test away, little healer. I have been poked and prodded by every doctor in the galaxy. One more will not hurt." What Dr. Yoon Hyejin found in her scans made no sense at all. According to every reading she took, Elder Korath was not actually dying of old age. His organs were healthy. His brain activity was normal. His cellular structure showed no signs of natural aging. But something was definitely wrong. "This is impossible," she muttered, running the scans again. "Elder Korath, according to my instruments, you should be perfectly healthy. But obviously you are not. There is something else happening here. Something that our medical science does not recognize." Park Min-seo had been quietly scanning the area with her temporal detection equipment. She was used to monitoring time flows around experimental devices, but she had never seen readings like these. "Dr. Yoon, you need to see this. The temporal fields around Elder Korath are completely unstable." "Temporal fields?" Velara asked. "What does that mean?" Min-seo showed her the readings on her scanner. "Time itself is wrong around your father. Instead of flowing normally, it is moving in loops and spirals. Parts of his body are experiencing time faster than other parts. It is like someone is stealing time from him. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Valara stared at the human engineer. Stealing time? That is impossible. Time cannot be stolen. Actually, it can, Park Min-seo said, her excitement growing as she understood what she was seeing. Advanced technology can manipulate temporal flow. But this is not natural time manipulation. This is artificial. Someone or something is doing this to your people. Dr. Kim Dae-ho felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. Valara, you said this condition is called the fading. How long have your people been suffering from it? As long as anyone can remember. Thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands. It has always claimed our eldest when they reach a certain age. We thought it was natural, part of the cycle of life and death. But what if it is not natural? Choi Bo-ram asked. What if someone created this as a weapon against your people? The idea was so shocking that Valara could not speak for several minutes. Finally, she found her voice. A weapon? But who would do such a thing? And why? Park Min-seo was studying her temporal readings more carefully. According to these scans, the time distortion follows a very specific pattern. It is too precise to be natural, too complex to be accidental. Someone designed this, someone built it, and they built it to target Vorthak specifically. But that would mean... Valara began, then stopped as the full implication hit her. It means your people have been under attack for thousands of years, Captain Jae-won said grimly. And the enemy has been so subtle that you never realized you were at war. Elder Korath struggled to raise his great head. If this is true, if the fading is truly a weapon, then who is our enemy? What species has the power to manipulate time itself? Dr. Kim Dae-ho was already thinking about the answer to that question. Valara, do your historical records mention any species that your people fought in ancient times? Anyone who might have had reason to create a long-term weapon against the Vorthak? Valara thought carefully. There were the Kronark Wars about 15,000 years ago. But the Kronark were completely destroyed. We made sure of that. Tell us about the Kronark, Park Min-seo said urgently. What were they like? What kind of technology did they have? They were obsessed with time, Valara replied. They built machines that could slow time, speed it up, even reverse it in small areas. They used temporal weapons in battle, aging their enemies to death in seconds. The war lasted for centuries because they kept changing the past to undo their defeats. And you are sure they were all destroyed? Dr. Yoon Hee-jin asked, completely sure. We turned their homeworld into cosmic dust. We hunted down every colony, every outpost, every ship. The Kronark extinction was total and final. Park Min-seo looked at her temporal scanner again. Valara, what if they were not as extinct as you thought? What if some of them survived, but not in the way you expected? What if they found a way to exist outside normal time? The emergency council meeting in the Great Crystal Chamber was unlike anything the Vorthak had ever held. For the first time in their 10,000-year history, tiny alien creatures sat at the same table as the mighty dragons who ruled their corner of the galaxy. Dr. Kim Dae-ho felt very small as he looked around. At the massive forms of the Vorthak Council, members Valara had spent 2 hours explaining the human discoveries to the council. The revelation that the fading was an artificial weapon had shocked even the oldest and wisest dragons. Now they needed to decide what to do about it. Even if these humans are correct, rumbled Counselor Morith the Ancient. What can we do? The Kronark have been dead for 15,000 years. You cannot fight ghosts and shadows. Park Min-seo stood up, her temporal scanner in her hands. Counselor Morith, the Kronark may not be dead in the way you think. Our scans show that the temporal weapon is still active, still drawing power from somewhere. That means someone or something is still controlling it. A machine, perhaps, suggested Counselor Zerath the Learned. The Kronark were known for their automated systems. This weapon could be running on ancient programming. Dr. Yoon Hee-jin shook her head. The patterns are too complex for a simple machine. The weapon adapts to each individual Vorthak. It learns their biological patterns and adjusts its effects accordingly. That requires intelligence, not just programming. General Thaxon the Terrible slammed one massive claw on the crystal table. Enough of this speculation. If the Kronark still exist in some form, then we find them and destroy them as we did before. The Vorthak do not cower from enemies no matter how strange they have become. With respect, General, Captain Lee Jae-won said carefully, this enemy has been attacking your people for thousands of years without you even knowing it. Traditional military approaches may not work against beings who exist outside normal time. Thaxon turned his burning red eyes toward the human captain. And what would you suggest, tiny creature? That we surrender to temporal parasites? Dr. Kim Dae-ho cleared his throat. All the massive dragon heads turned toward him, and he had to force himself not to run from the room. General, we propose something that has never been tried before. We want to go into the time stream directly and confront the Chronarch on their own territory. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the soft humming of the crystal walls seemed to stop. Finally, Elder Zephys the Wise spoke in a voice like distant wind. Enter the time stream? That is impossible. No living creature can survive in raw temporal energy. You would be torn apart instantly. Park Min-seo stepped forward. Not necessarily, Elder. Humans have one advantage that other species do not. Our brains process time in a unique way. We experience it linearly, but we can also think about it non-linearly. We can imagine past and future simultaneously, while staying anchored in the present. What does that mean? Valara asked. Dr. Yoon Hee-jin had been studying the medical data from her scans of Elder Korath. It means human neural patterns might be naturally resistant to temporal manipulation. When I scanned Elder Korath, I noticed something strange. The time distortions around him became weaker whenever one of us humans got close to him. You are suggesting that human presence disrupts the Chronarch weapon? Counselor Morith asked. More than that, Dr. Kim Dae-ho said excitedly. We think human consciousness might be able to act as a shield against temporal attacks. If we could create a device that amplifies this effect, we might be able to protect Vorthak minds while they enter the time stream. General Thaxon snorted, sending small flames shooting from his nostrils. Even if this wild theory is correct, how would you build such a device? Temporal manipulation requires technology beyond anything your species possesses. Park Min-seo smiled. Actually, General, we would not build it alone. We would need Vorthak help. Your people understand energy manipulation in ways that we do not. Combined with human temporal theory and our natural resistance to time effects, we might be able to create something entirely new. A temporal anchor, Dr. Kim Dae-ho added. A device that would let someone enter the time stream while staying connected to normal reality. The human operator would guide the way, while a Vorthak partner provides the power and energy control needed to survive in temporal space. Elder Zephys leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying the humans intently. This is beyond dangerous. This is insane. You are talking about entering a realm where the normal laws of physics do not apply, where cause and effect become meaningless. Even if you survive the journey, how would you fight beings made of pure time? We do not fight them, Choi Bo-ram said quietly. We solve the problem. Explain, Valara demanded. Choi Bo-ram had been thinking about this since they first learned about the Chronarch. Fighting the Chronarch in the time stream would be like fighting the ocean while swimming. We cannot win by being stronger than them, but we might win by being smarter. The Chronarch survived their extinction by transforming themselves into temporal beings, Dr. Kim Dae-ho continued. But what if that transformation was not a choice? What if it was a trap they fell into? What if we could show them how to become physical again? Captain Jae-won understood where this was leading. You want to negotiate with them. Offer them something they want in exchange for stopping their attack on the Vorthak. Exactly, Dr. Yoon Hee-jin said. From what we know about the Chronarch, they were once a physical species like the Vorthak. They probably miss having real bodies, real lives. Being made of pure time might be a kind of prison for them. General Thaxon was growing more angry by the moment. You want to help our enemies? You want to reward them for 15,000 years of murder? We want to solve the problem permanently, Park Min-seo replied. General, you could hunt the Chronarch through the time stream for another 15,000 years and never catch them all. But if we can convince them to stop voluntarily, the threat ends immediately. And if they refuse to negotiate? Counselor Zerath asked. Dr. Kim Dae-ho and Park Min-seo exchanged glances. They had discussed this possibility during the long journey to Drakmor Prime. Then we find another way. Humans are good at improvising when the first plan does not work. Valara had been listening to the entire discussion in growing amazement. These tiny humans were proposing to do something that the mighty Vorthak had never even considered. They wanted to enter a realm that was completely alien to physical creatures, find enemies who had hidden there for thousands of years, and somehow convince them to stop their revenge. The risks are enormous, she said finally. If this goes wrong, we could lose everyone who attempts it. And even if it works, there is no guarantee that the Chronarch will listen to reason. The alternative is watching your people die one by one until none are left, Captain J1 pointed out. At least this plan offers hope. Elder Korath had been silent throughout the meeting, but now he spoke from his resting place at the edge of the chamber. His voice was weak but clear. I am dying. The weapon is killing me slowly, and it will kill others after me. If there is even a small chance that these humans can stop it, then we must try. Father, the danger, Valara began. Daughter, I have lived for nearly 2,000 years. I have seen the rise and fall of civilizations. I have watched stars be born and die. If my death can help save our people, then it is a good death. But if these humans can find a way to save us all, then it is an even better life. The council debated for several more hours, but Elder Korath's words had settled the matter. The Vorthak would help the humans build their temporal anchor device. They would attempt something that had never been tried before in the history of the galaxy. As the meeting ended and the dragons dispersed to their various duties, Dr. Kim Dae-ho found himself alone with Valara in a small side chamber. Are you certain about this? She asked him. You are proposing to risk your life for people you met only days ago. Dae-ho thought about his answer carefully. Valara, my species has a saying. We are only as strong as the weakest among us. Your people are dying, and if we can help, then we must help. That is what makes us human. And if the Chronarch destroy you in the time stream, then at least we will have tried. Sometimes trying is more important than succeeding. Valara stared at the small human for a long moment. I am beginning to understand why my father believes in your people. You think about problems in ways that we never considered. You see possibilities where we see only obstacles. That is because we have had to, Dae-ho replied. Humans are small and weak compared to most alien species. We survive by being clever, not by being strong. Sometimes that cleverness can solve problems that strength cannot. 3 days later, construction began on the temporal anchor in the deepest levels of the crystal sanctum. Human technology merged with Vorthak energy systems in ways that neither species had thought possible. The device took shape slowly, a gleaming mixture of quantum processors and crystal matrix systems. But even as they worked, none of them knew that the Chronarch had detected their efforts. In the flowing currents of the time stream, ancient intelligences stirred with anger and anticipation. The revenge they had planned for 15,000 years was almost complete. They would not allow a handful of primitive mammals to interfere with their perfect justice. The temporal anchor hummed with power in the deepest chamber of the crystal sanctum. The device looked like nothing anyone had ever seen before. Human quantum processors were woven together with Vorthak crystal matrices, creating patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. Energy flowed through the structure in ways that defied normal physics. Dr. Kim Dae-ho stood before the device, wearing a specially designed suit that would protect him from the worst effects of temporal exposure. The suit was another impossible fusion of technologies. Human life support systems were merged with Vorthak energy shields, creating protection that neither species could have built alone. Are you ready for this? Valara asked. She would be his anchor to the physical world, maintaining the connection that would allow him to return from the time stream. Her massive form was connected to the device through crystalline cables that pulsed with her natural energy. As ready as anyone can be for something that has never been attempted before, Dae-ho replied. He tried to keep his voice calm, but everyone in the chamber could hear the nervousness underneath. He was about to enter a realm where human beings were never meant to exist. Park Min-seo checked her instruments one final time. Temporal field is stable. The anchor connection is holding. All safety systems are online. She paused and looked at her friend. Dae-ho, if anything goes wrong, if the connection starts to fail, you have to come back immediately. Do not try to be a hero. I understand, Dae-ho said, but they all knew that once he entered the time stream, normal rules would no longer apply. He might not be able to return even if he wanted to. Dr. Yoon Hye-jin monitored his vital signs from her medical station. Heart rate is elevated but stable. Brain activity is normal. Temporal resistance field is at maximum strength. She looked up at him with concern in her eyes. Remember, your human neural patterns are your greatest protection in there. Trust your instincts even if they seem to make no sense. Captain Lee Jae-won and Choi Bo-ram watched from the observation area. If this mission failed, they would have to find another way to stop the Chronarch before more Vorthak died. The fading had already begun affecting 3 more elders across Vorthak space. Time was running out in more ways than one. Initiating temporal transition, Park Min-seo announced. Beginning in 3, 2, 1. The world around Dr. Kim Dae-ho dissolved into streams of pure light and energy. Reality became fluid, flowing around him like water. Past, present, and future existed simultaneously in the same space. He could see the birth of stars and their death occurring at the same moment. Civilizations rose and fell in the blink of an eye. But his human mind, trained to process linear time, began to impose order on the chaos. He focused on his mission, using his connection to Valara as a guide through the temporal maze. Slowly, the random flows of time began to make sense. He could see patterns in the chaos, paths through the confusion, and then he saw them. The Chronarch were not what he had expected. In his imagination, they had been dark and threatening, obvious enemies filled with hatred. The reality was more complex and more tragic. They appeared as geometric patterns of pure temporal energy, constantly shifting and changing. But underneath the alien forms, Dae-ho could sense something familiar. They were intelligent beings just like humans and Vorthak. They were afraid. Who dares enter our domain? The voice of the Chronarch came from everywhere and nowhere, speaking in harmonies that hurt to hear. What creature is foolish enough to challenge the masters of time itself? My name is Kim Dae-ho, he replied, his voice somehow carrying across the temporal currents. I am human. I came here to talk. The geometric patterns shifted, moving closer to examine this strange visitor. Human. We know this species. Small creatures from a young world. Why do you not age and die as you should? Why do our temporal fields not affect you? Because humans experience time differently than other species, Dae-ho explained. We live in the moment, but we can imagine all moments. We are naturally resistant to time manipulation. Interesting, the Chronarch said. Their voice carried less hostility now, replaced by curiosity. You should not be able to survive in our realm. Yet here you are, speaking to us as an equal. Why have you come, resistant human? I came to ask you to stop killing the Vorthak. The patterns of the Chronarch suddenly blazed with anger, filling the time stream with waves of temporal energy that would have destroyed any other living creature. The Vorthak destroyed us. They turned our homeworld to dust. They hunted our people across the galaxy until none remained in physical form. They deserve to suffer as we have suffered. I understand your anger, Dae-ho said carefully. The Vorthak did terrible things to your people. But the ones who are dying now were not the ones who fought that war. They are innocent of their ancestors' crimes. Innocence is irrelevant, the Chronarch replied. The Vorthak as a species must pay for what they did. Our revenge has taken 15,000 years to complete, but it will be complete. Dae-ho had expected this response, but he had also prepared for it. What if I told you that your revenge is actually a prison? What if becoming beings of pure time was not your choice, but a trap you fell into? The temporal energy around him grew still. Explain your meaning, human. You transformed yourselves to survive the Vorthak extinction, but in doing so, you lost everything that made you truly alive. You cannot touch, cannot taste, cannot feel physical sensations. You exist, but you do not live. Your revenge has become your cage. The Chronarch were silent for a long time. When they spoke again, their voice carried a note of sadness that made Dae-ho's heart ache. We remember having bodies. We remember the warmth of sunlight, the taste of food, the touch of loved ones. Those memories are all we have left of what we once were. What if you could have those things again? Dae-ho asked. What if there was a way to return to physical form without giving up your knowledge of time? Impossible, the Chronarch said. But their voice lacked conviction. We searched for such a method for thousands of years before beginning our revenge. No such process exists. Maybe it did not exist then, Dae-ho said. But things change. New technologies are developed. New partnerships are formed. Humans and Vorthak working together have already created things that neither species could build alone. The geometric patterns of the Chronarch began moving in complex spirals, as if they were having an internal debate. You offer hope where none exists, human. You speak of impossible solutions to unsolvable problems. That is what humans do. Dae-ho replied with a smile they could not see. We specialize in impossible solutions. We solve problems by thinking about them in ways that no one else considers. And what would you ask in return for this impossible solution? Stop the fading. Release the temporal weapon that is killing the Vorthak elders. Let us prove that cooperation works better than revenge. The Chronarch considered this for what felt like hours in the time stream, though Daeho knew that only minutes had passed in normal reality. Finally, they spoke again. "We will agree to a temporary halt of our weapon, but only temporary, human. You have one cycle of your home star to prove that your impossible solution is real. If you fail, if you cannot find a way to restore our physical forms, then our revenge will continue until every Vorthak is dead." "That is fair," Daeho agreed. 1 year to solve a problem that has existed for 15,000 years. Be warned, human. Other Chronarch may not agree with this decision. Some of our kind have become so consumed with revenge that they can think of nothing else. They may try to stop you. As if summoned by these words, new patterns appeared in the time stream. These Chronarch moved differently, their forms sharp and aggressive where the others were fluid and contemplative. Their voices carried the sound of breaking reality. "Traitors," they screamed. "You would abandon our righteous revenge for the false promises of an inferior species? The Vorthak must die. All of them. The weapon will continue. Go, human," the first Chronarch said urgently. "Return to your physical realm. We will hold off our extremist brothers for as long as we can. But you must hurry. Find your impossible solution quickly, or everything will be lost." The aggressive Chronarch launched themselves at Daeho, their forms crackling with destructive temporal energy. But his human resistance to time effects protected him long enough to activate his return signal. The connection to Valara pulled him back through the streams of time, back to the safety of normal reality. He materialized in the crystal sanctum, gasping and shaking from the experience. The worried faces of his friends surrounded him as Dr. Yoon Hee-jin checked his vital signs. "What happened?" Valara asked anxiously. "You were only gone for 6 minutes, but the temporal readings were chaotic." "I found them," Daeho said when he finally caught his breath. "I talked to the Chronarch. Some of them want to stop the revenge, but others refuse. We have 1 year to find a way to restore their physical forms, or the killing continues. 1 year to solve a problem that ancient beings could not solve in 15,000 years, Park Min-seo said grimly. "No pressure at all." "Actually," Choi Bo-ram said thoughtfully, "we might have advantages they did not have. We have human innovation, Vorthak energy manipulation, and now we have willing Chronarch partners. If we work together, we might actually be able to do this." 3 months had passed since Dr. Kim Daeho's first journey into the time stream. The temporary halt of the fading had saved dozens of Vorthak elders, but everyone knew it would not last forever. The extremist Chronarch grew stronger each day and their patience was running out. In the rebuilt laboratories beneath the crystal sanctum, an impossible collaboration was taking place. Human scientists worked alongside Vorthak engineers and the moderate Chronarch who had agreed to help. The sight would have been unbelievable just months earlier. Beings of pure temporal energy guided creatures of flesh and scale as they attempted to solve a problem that had seemed impossible. Park Min-seo stared at the equations covering the crystal walls of the main laboratory. Mathematics in 3 different styles of thinking filled every available surface. Human linear calculations mixed with Vorthak energy formulas and Chronarch temporal theories. The result was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "The problem is not creating physical bodies," she explained to the assembled team. "Vorthak bioshaping technology can grow any form we need. The problem is transferring consciousness from pure temporal energy back into physical matter without destroying the mind in the process." Dr. Yoon Hee-jin nodded from her position at the medical analysis station. "Every simulation we have run ends the same way. The moment a Chronarch consciousness touches physical matter, it disperses into random energy. It is like trying to pour water into a container made of mist." One of the moderate Chronarch, who called himself Keeper of Moments, flickered into visible form near the main workspace. His geometric patterns pulsed with frustration. "We have tried this transition 1,000 times over the millennia. The result is always the same: death. True death, not just the loss of physical form." Valara carefully adjusted the crystal matrix that allowed the Chronarch to communicate in normal space. "There must be something we are missing, some element that none of us have considered." Dr. Kim Daeho had been silent for most of the discussion, studying the data from a different angle. His experience in the time stream had changed him in ways that the others were only beginning to understand. He could now sense temporal currents even in normal space, feel the flow of time like a river around him. "What if we are thinking about this wrong?" he said suddenly. "What if the problem is not transferring consciousness from energy to matter, What if the problem is that we are trying to force something that should happen naturally? Captain Lee Jae-won looked up from the tactical displays he had been monitoring. Explain what you mean, Daeho. Think about how the Chronarch became temporal beings in the first place, Daeho continued. They did not plan it. They were trying to survive the destruction of their physical forms, and their consciousness naturally flowed into the time stream. It was an emergency response, not a deliberate choice. Choi Bo-ram had been studying the historical records of the Chronarch transformation. You are suggesting that the change from physical to temporal was a natural process, but we have been trying to force the reverse change through artificial means. Exactly, Daeho said excitedly. What if consciousness wants to return to physical form? What if we just need to give it a reason to choose matter over energy? Keeper of Moments pulsed brighter. Human, your words carry hope, but we do not understand your meaning. How does consciousness choose anything? It simply exists. Dr. Yoon Hye-jin was beginning to see where Daeho's thoughts were leading. Unless consciousness is not just passive existence. Unless it actively seeks the environment where it can experience the most sensation, the most life. The Chronarch became temporal beings to escape death, Park Min-seo added, following the logic. But they have been existing in a realm without physical sensation for 15,000 years. Their consciousness might be starving for real experience. So instead of forcing the transfer, Valara said slowly, we create an environment where physical existence is more attractive than temporal existence. But how? Keeper of Moments asked. We have forgotten what physical sensation feels like. We have no memory of what we are supposed to want. Daeho smiled. That is where human psychology comes in. We understand desire. We understand what makes consciousness choose one experience over another, and we know how to create attraction instead of force. The plan they developed over the next several weeks was unlike anything attempted in galactic history. Instead of trying to pull Chronarch consciousness into physical bodies, they would create bodies so perfectly suited to Chronarch minds that the consciousness would naturally flow toward them. Dr. Yoon Hye-jin used Vorthak bioshaping technology to grow bodies that were not quite like any species that had ever existed. They were humanoid in basic shape, but with nervous systems designed to process temporal information as easily as physical sensation. The bodies could experience both normal time and time stream awareness simultaneously. Park Min-seo created quantum processors that could be implanted into the new bodies, allowing Chronarch consciousness to maintain its temporal abilities while gaining physical form. The processors were based on human brain patterns, which meant they could handle paradox and contradiction without breaking down. Valara and the other Vorthak provided the massive amounts of energy needed to maintain the transformation process. Their natural ability to manipulate forces that other species could barely detect was essential to keeping the new bodies stable during the consciousness transfer. But the most important element came from Choi Bo-ram's research into what made life worth living. She created sensory environments that would remind the Chronarch what they had lost: the smell of growing things, the warmth of sunlight, the taste of simple foods, the touch of friendly contact, all the small pleasures that made physical existence meaningful. We are not just giving them bodies, she explained. We are giving them reasons to want bodies. The first test was scheduled for a day when the extremist Chronarch were distracted by attacks on distant Vorthak colonies. Keeper of Moments had volunteered to attempt the transition, knowing that failure would mean his permanent destruction. The team gathered in the main laboratory as the bio-shaped body was moved into position. It looked almost human, but with subtle differences that showed its temporal heritage. Silver lines traced across its skin in patterns that echoed the geometric forms of Chronarch energy beings. Its eyes held depths that seemed to reflect infinity. Beginning consciousness attraction sequence, Park Min-seo announced. All systems are stable. Sensory environment is active. The laboratory filled with gentle sounds and pleasant scents. Soft light played across the surfaces of the new body. Everything was designed to appeal to consciousness that had been trapped in the harsh environment of pure time for thousands of years. Keeper of Moments began to change. His geometric patterns flowed toward the waiting body like water finding the lowest level. Instead of being forced into physical form, his consciousness was choosing it, drawn by the promise of sensation and experience. It is working, Dr. Yoon Hye-jin whispered as her instruments showed consciousness successfully integrating with physical matter. The neural patterns are stabilizing. Brain activity is normal. He is alive. The body on the examination table opened silver eyes and drew its first breath. Keeper of Moments looked at his new hands with wonder, flexing fingers that could actually touch things. When Valara carefully offered him a piece of fruit to taste, he wept at the explosion of flavor across his tongue. "I had forgotten," he said in a voice that carried the music of temporal currents but was definitely, unmistakably physical. "I had forgotten what it meant to truly live." But their celebration was cut short by alarms throughout the crystal sanctum. The extremist Chronarch had detected what was happening. They were coming to stop the restoration process, and they were bringing the full power of their temporal weapons with them. "How long until they arrive?" Captain Jaewon demanded. Park Min-seo checked her instruments. 6 hours, maybe less. "They are moving through the time stream faster than anything we have ever detected." Dr. Kim Dae-ho looked at the single restored Chronarch, then at the dozen empty bodies waiting for consciousness transfer. "Can we complete the process before they get here?" "Not all of them," Dr. Yoon Hye-jin said grimly. "Maybe 3 or 4 more if everything goes perfectly." "Then we do what we can," Valara said with determination. "And we prepare to defend what we have accomplished." As the team rushed to restore more Chronarch before the extremists arrived, none of them realized that the solution to their greatest challenge would come not from advanced technology or ancient wisdom, but from the simple human understanding that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is the desire to truly live. The extremist Chronarch arrived like a storm of broken time. Reality twisted around the crystal sanctum, as their temporal weapons tore holes in the fabric of space itself. Ancient dragons fled to emergency shelters as past and future collided in impossible ways above their heads. Dr. Kim Dae-ho stood in the main laboratory with his team, watching their instruments go wild as the attackers approached. 3 more Chronarch had been successfully restored to physical form, but the remaining moderate Chronarch were still trapped in the time stream. The extremists would destroy them all before allowing any more restorations. "They are trying to collapse the temporal anchor," Park Min-seo shouted over the sound of reality breaking apart. "If they succeed, anyone connected to the time stream will be lost forever." Captain Lee Jae-won coordinated the defense from his command station. "Vorthak military forces are engaging, but their weapons cannot touch beings made of pure time. We need another solution." Dr. Yoon Hye-jin was working frantically to stabilize the newly restored Chronarch, as temporal shockwaves threatened to tear their consciousness apart. The restored ones are in danger. Their minds are still learning how to exist in physical form. These attacks could destroy them. Valara spread her great wings and roared her defiance at the chaos above. "My people have protected this sanctuary for 10,000 years. We will not fail now." But even her mighty voice was lost in the screaming of torn time. Dae-ho made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of trying to defend against the extremist attack, he activated the temporal anchor and prepared to enter the time stream again. "What are you doing?" Valara demanded. "It is suicide to go in there while they are attacking. The temporal storms will destroy you instantly." "Maybe," Dae-ho said as he put on his protective suit. "But I have to try something. Fighting them with weapons will not work. They are too powerful, too angry. But maybe I can reach the part of them that remembers being alive." "Dae-ho, no," Min-seo pleaded. "This is not like before. These Chronarch have been consumed by hatred for thousands of years. They will not listen to reason." But Dae-ho was already stepping into the temporal field. "Then I will not use reason. I will use something more powerful than hatred." The time stream had become a battlefield. Moderate Chronarch fought desperately against their extremist brothers while reality shattered around them. Dae-ho found himself in the middle of the conflict, somehow protected by his human nature from the worst effects of the temporal war. The extremist Chronarch noticed him immediately. Their leader, a being of pure rage that called itself the Final Vengeance, turned its attention from the battle to focus on the small human who dared to interfere. "You," it snarled with a voice like the end of worlds. "You are the one who convinced our weak brothers to abandon their sacred duty. You will watch as we destroy every Vorthak in the galaxy, starting with your friends." "I know you are angry," Dae-ho said calmly. "I know you have been hurt in ways that cannot be healed. The Vorthak destroyed your people, your homes, your entire way of life. You have every right to hate them. Then why do you stand against us?" Final Vengeance demanded. "Because hatred is a prison," Dae-ho replied. "You have been trapped in your anger for 15,000 years. You have forgotten everything else you used to be. You were once a people who built beautiful things, who loved and laughed and lived. Now you are only revenge, nothing more. The extremist Chronarch attacked, sending waves of temporal energy that should have aged Deho to dust in seconds. But his human resistance held, and he continued speaking. I met one of your people who chose to return to physical form. Do you want to know what he said when he tasted food for the first time in thousands of years? He wept. He wept because he had forgotten what joy felt like. Joy is weakness, Final Vengeance snarled. Only vengeance matters. No, Deho said firmly. Vengeance is what you chose when you could not choose life. But life is still possible. Physical form is still possible. You can still remember what it felt like to be happy. For just a moment, the attack stopped. In that brief silence, Deho did something that no one expected. He began to sing. It was a simple song, one that human children learned from their parents. A song about coming home after a long journey, about finding peace after struggle, about the simple joy of being alive. His voice carried across the time stream, somehow reaching every Chronarch in the temporal battlefield. The effect was immediate and devastating. The extremist Chronarch began to remember. They remembered singing their own songs in voices that could touch physical air. They remembered the warmth of their homeworld sun. They remembered holding their children and watching them grow. Stop, Final Vengeance begged, its form beginning to flicker and change. Stop making us remember. The pain is too much. The pain means you are still alive inside, Deho said gently. It means you can still choose something other than hatred. You can choose to live again. One by one, the extremist Chronarch began to withdraw their weapons. The temporal storms calmed as ancient beings remembered what they had lost in their pursuit of revenge. They had spent so long focused on making others suffer that they had forgotten their own suffering could end. But the Vorthak, Final Vengeance said weakly. They must pay for what they did. They have paid, Deho replied. They have lived for 15,000 years knowing that they destroyed an entire species. They carry that guilt every day. And now they are trying to make it right by helping bring your people back to life. In the physical realm, the attacks on the Crystal Sanctum had stopped. Valara and her team watched in amazement as the temporal distortions began to fade. The extremist Chronarch were choosing to end their assault. When Deho returned from the time stream, he brought unexpected visitors. A dozen extremist Chronarch had agreed to attempt physical restoration. Even Final Vengeance, its form much dimmer than before, was willing to try returning to life rather than continuing its existence as pure hatred. The restoration process took 3 more months. One by one, the ancient Chronarch consciousness flowed into new bodies designed to bridge the gap between temporal and physical existence. Each successful transformation was celebrated by humans, Vorthak, and the previously restored Chronarch alike. Keeper of Moments, now comfortable in his new form, worked with Dr. Yoon Hye-jin to help his people adjust to physical sensations they had not experienced in millennia. Final Vengeance, who chose the name Seeker of Peace for his new life, spent hours learning to appreciate simple pleasures like the taste of water and the feeling of wind. The fading stopped completely across all Vorthak space. Elder Korath recovered his full strength and lived to see his great-grandchildren born. The temporal weapon that had claimed so many lives was dismantled by its creators, who now had better things to do with their time. The success of the Restoration Project changed galactic politics forever. The human Vorthak Chronarch Alliance became the most powerful force for peace and cooperation in known space. Other species began seeking human help with their own impossible problems, recognizing that sometimes fresh perspective was more valuable than ancient wisdom. Dr. Kim Deho established the Institute for Impossible Solutions on Drakmor Prime, where beings from hundreds of species worked together to solve problems that had seemed hopeless. Park Min-seo became the galaxy's leading expert on temporal engineering, developing new technologies that benefited everyone. Dr. Yoon Hye-jin founded the first interspecies medical center, where the unique biology of different species was studied and celebrated. Captain Lee Jae-won was appointed as Earth's first galactic ambassador, representing human interests in the growing Interspecies Council. Choi Bo-ram wrote the definitive history of the Chronarch crisis, a book that became required reading in schools across the galaxy. Valara succeeded her father as leader of the Vorthak Confederation, but she ruled with a new understanding of cooperation over domination. Under her guidance, the Vorthak became protectors and teachers rather than conquerors, sharing their ancient wisdom with younger species. 5 years after the crisis ended, the three species gathered for the first anniversary of what they called Restoration Day. Humans, Vorthak, and former Chronarchs celebrated together in the Crystal Sanctum, now rebuilt as a monument to the power of working together. Elder Korath, his scales brilliant emerald, once again addressed the crowd. For 10,000 years, my people believed that wisdom came from living long and learning much. The humans taught us that sometimes wisdom comes from living briefly but thinking differently. They showed us that the youngest voice in the room might have the most important thing to say. Seeker of peace, his silver-lined skin catching the light from the crystal walls, spoke for his people. We spent 15,000 years learning to hate. In a single year, the humans taught us to remember love. They gave us back our lives not through force or technology, but through the simple understanding that everyone deserves a chance to choose happiness over hatred. Dr. Kim Dae-ho stood among his friends, surrounded by beings who had once been impossible enemies. The little human from Earth had helped solve a problem that had seemed hopeless, not through superior strength or ancient knowledge, but through the uniquely human ability to see possibilities where others saw only obstacles.